As everyone's logging in, I'll just start with or open up the session. Um, Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second learning series webinar, Hub Culture and Sustainable Spaces for the Future. We're very excited to dive into this topic with our panelists and all of you who are here with us today. Artsfield Ontario is a provincial art service organization that provides small and medium-sized organizations with tools, trainings, and advice to manage physical and digital creative spaces successfully. APO works to reimagine the future of creative spaces through dedicated research projects and an engaged network of supportive partners. Before we begin the discussion, we wish to acknowledge the land on which we are meeting. As we come together, I would like to acknowledge that Artsfield Ontario's province-wide work takes place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Anishinaabe, the Attawadurrung, the Cree, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. Artsfield Ontario commits to making our programs and initiatives safe and accessible for all. And we also recognize that we are a settler organization that values respectful collaboration with all Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, and who continue to be our neighbors, friends, and colleagues. In today's webinar, we will be talking about different types of shared space models that have emerged as a cost-effective and sustainable solution for the arts and creative industries. Almost a decade ago, the Creative Hubs model moved through the sector as a viable approach to support the arts and a variety of arts disciplines. A hub model for creative practitioners not only offers an affordable space solution for many, but also creates a sense of community and promotes environmental stewardship through shared resources. We saw many spaces emerge over the years, and now in the wake of COVID, we feel a discussion is timely on how these spaces are operating today and what lies ahead on the horizon. We are delighted to have our panelists here today who represent three creative hubs. We have the Center for Social Innovation in Toronto, we have Sketch Working Arts, also in Toronto, and the TET Center for Creativity and Learning in Kingston. Thanks all for joining us, and I'll hand things over to Tat to introduce our panelists more formally.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tatiana Doucette, and I'm the Program Manager at Artsfield Ontario. Welcome to the discussion, and I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So joining us from Kingston, we have Brianne Franklin, the Executive Director of the TET Center for Creativity and Learning. Brianne has worked in leadership and program development roles at a range of arts, culture, and heritage organizations across Ontario. She has been supporting the TET community as the director and started with the organization as the program and communications coordinator. Brianne is passionate about community engagement, facilitating creative learning opportunities, and bringing people together through the arts. Next, we have Naveen Sedki, the Resource Mobilization Director at Sketch Working Arts. Naveen boasts over 2 decades of experience in mobilizing resources for anti-poverty and social justice causes across various sectors, including the arts, documentary, social services, and waste diversion. She specializes in community-centric fundraising and mutual aid, fostering sustainable partnerships for systemic change, and she is passionate about leveraging the arts for social justice and equity. Naveen enjoys nature, art, film, documentaries, and music in her spare time. And finally, I'd like to introduce Gonzalo Duarte, a Director of Co-working Design and Operations at CSI Spadina. From becoming a member to a desk exchange animator to the community manager at CSI Annex, Gonzalo has been inspired by the mix of people, property, programs, and processes at CSI since 2015. Creating the ambiance and conditions for members and organizations to feel welcome, safe, supported, and productive in advancing their wide-ranging missions is what his role is all about. So to start off our conversation today, we have a few discussion questions that we'll talk through with our panelists, and after that, we will have time for a Q&A at the end, where folks can use the Q&A function in the chat box to send questions directly to the panelists, or use the chat function in the Zoom screen at the bottom below as well. So we're going to start talking about all of these spaces, and I'm actually going to share my screen so that we can put a visual to each space as we go through them. But we're going to start with Brianne, and we're going to ask her to share a bit about the TET, give us a bit of a backstory, and some of this can include the mission, the organizational mission, programs, activities, and different types of activities that you offer in your space. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive into it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. So yeah, I'm from the TET Center for Creativity and Learning. We're located in Kingston, Ontario. The building we work out of is a designated heritage site. So the site is actually owned by the city of Kingston, and our organization, the TET Center for Creativity and Learning, is the operator of the building. So we act as a sub-landlord, and also our own nonprofit charity organization. So within the building, we work alongside 8 not-for-profit organizations. We have 8 studios available for various programming and rental spaces. And then we have our 4 short-term rental spaces, which are actually shown in the images here, which is pretty cool. So a little bit about our building itself. It was formerly part of the Morton Brewery and Distillery complex that was built in the 19th century. And then over the years, it had various uses, but eventually the city of Kingston purchased the site, and through community advocacy, it became what it is today. So we're just celebrating our 10th anniversary next year. So the first couple years we're really just focused on operating the building, sustaining the organization, and just basically working as a collaborative and creative hub. So some of our main programs are through our creativity studio artists program in the studios on the 2nd floor. So those are short or longer term license opportunities for artists to grow their arts practice. And then within that area as well, oh, sorry, my internet just did a weird thing there. So within that area as well, one of those studios has recently been delegated as a resident artist studio. So that space is for an awarded residency. And through that, we do our community engagement programming. And basically just our overall mission is to make space for arts exploration, artistic development, and creative incubation. And we just strive to be a really welcoming community hub, and provide resources to the organizations and artists within the building, and then also create just an opportunity for everyone to get involved in some way, whether it's through our specific programming or alongside the other tenants.
Great. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that as we get further along, but thanks for the intro about your space. Next, we're going to introduce Sketch Working Arts Space, and I'll hand it over to Naveen to talk a bit about what their space is all about.
Thanks so much, Tatiana, and thanks for having myself and Sketch on this panel. We're really excited to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about Sketch Working Arts, and you can see some of our studios here, 4 of many of our studios on the screen. So Sketch Working Arts is a community arts organization. We're located downtown West End of Toronto on Shaw Street, inside of what was formerly called the Artscape Young Place building, now known as the Arts Hub Young Place. Arts Hub, that building is actually more of a condo style building. So we are located in the basement there and then have an office on the 2nd floor as well. So we're a community arts organization. We engage primarily queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and other racialized young people who are navigating systemic oppression to experience the transformative power of the arts, to build leadership and economic self-sufficiency, and to cultivate environmental and social change through the arts. That's essentially our mission. We do that by combining sort of a balance of creative and social service programming, as well as wraparound supports that connect youth to primary and mental health supports, things like housing, community networks, in addition to all of the free arts programming that we engage young people with. Some of the disciplines that we work in, and you can see, I'll kind of go through order of the photos there. That first photo is our ceramics studio. So we work in ceramics. The second is our music studio, which is quite a robust rehearsal space, but they're attached there is a recording space as well. Our our main studio, which is a multi-purpose studio primarily used for visual arts. And then that fourth photo there is our movement studio. So we do lots of different types of movement, anything from kung fu to burlesque to pride boot camps, sexy dancing, all sorts of stuff. In addition to these disciplines, we also do things like culinary, screen printing. So we have quite a lot of different disciplines and activities happening in our studios, which is always exciting and always quite interesting to sort of watch the like intersection of different disciplines happening in the same space, which we think is a pretty special thing. Our programming kind of falls under three pillars in order for us to sort of meet more holistic needs for our participants. And I should mention that our participants are 18 to 35 years old. We've increased that recently from 30 after listening to a number of our participants really requesting that the age range get increased. Just to go back, our three pillars are arts wellness, which really focuses on things like warm meals, wraparound supports, access to a food pantry, access to harm reduction supplies, personal care supplies, referrals, all of those kinds of things fall under arts wellness. Arts production, which is really about the production of the different disciplines that we work within, also providing opportunities to artists that are paid opportunities. And then arts leadership, which is really about growing the next generation of arts leaders, whether or not those are entrepreneurs or leaders of their own arts for social change organizations. So we have a few programs under the arts leadership pillar. But all those programs really are intended to deepen people's connection to the arts, their self and their community. We started in 1996, even though we have not been in this space since 1996. And Sketch very much started as a very, very, very grassroots drop-in service for street-involved and unhoused youth. Mostly which were navigating the shelter system. So you can imagine that sort of a storefront model where folks could come in and grab a warm cup of coffee and then maybe connect with community and then sort of like build on art making and facilitation from there. We spent years and years and years moving around all over Toronto, a few years where we didn't have a location. And in 2014, we were able to move into the Artscape Young Place building on Shaw Street. And in 2020, we were able to run a community bond campaign to purchase our space, which was really exciting. So we're community owned through community bonds. And through those community bonds, we were able to purchase the studio space, which is 7,000 square feet, and then our office space, which is 2,000 square feet. Yeah, that's a little bit about Sketch. So
Great, thanks for the intro. I think some of what you were saying with the beauty of shared spaces is something that's definitely going to come up across a lot in our conversation today. I think just from how you've described Sketch, even though each organization here today is a different model, I guess, I think it's there's that core connection with community that's at the core of each of your spaces. So looking forward to hearing more about that. I'll hand it over to Gonzalo and we'll hear a bit about CSI.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for gathering us. It's a real honor and pleasure to be together with other colleagues in Ontario who, regardless of size or scope, are really mission driven and really involved and engaged proactively with building and supporting the arts community. So thrilled to be here. Thank you very much. The Center for Social Innovation is 20 years old. It was around this time in 2004 that 4 people got together, an activist, an architect, a tech person, and I don't know who the fourth was, maybe a money person, and said, we notice all these people who are spread out. They're working in cafes or out of their home or in borrowed space. And we're wondering what would happen if we brought them together. And so they did. They leased space and assembled one part-time staff member to convene 14 organizations at our original location at 215 Spadina, just north of Queen here in downtown Toronto. And from there, a movement started. We now have over 6,000 individuals who have come and gone through CSI. We currently have about 1,800 individual members and about 600 organizational members. So the math there is we work with small and medium-sized organizations who occupy two of our owned properties, one at 720 Bathurst at Bloor, CSI Annex, and the other one here at 192 Spadina, CSI Spadina. We, thanks to the foresight of some people ahead of my 8 years here, we purchased these buildings one by one, and that's turned out to be, tremendously helpful. It's what got us through the pandemic. We're by no means flush. We're typically like property rich and cash poor, like most, like most nonprofits. But being owners of the building is obviously a great asset and gives us great advantage. It's also a great liability. But so managing this 100,000 square feet requires a lot of time and effort. Fortunately, we have staff dedicated to that. We're a staff team across all departments of about 30 people. And we have staff who keep the place running, and we have staff who provide animation and programming to those members who are very different in their composition. We have arts, we have education, we have health, we have tech, we have advocacy, we have local agencies, we have international development organizations, we have almost every type of imaginable member here. And so we work to support them. We are a co-working space and a commercial office leasing space. We do not receive any funding other than what we earn through our own properties. Occasionally, if we do, it's project specific, but we have developed an earned revenue model that has had us squeeze by and continues to be the case. We are right now in the process of consolidating our operations. We at one time ran CSI New York and also CSI Regent Park, but like I think most actors in our sector, we've had to sort of pull back and mitigate our risks. So we started off as a co-working space, and then we realized what our real business model was we're in the business of connecting people and facilitating collaboration. And then we realized that really what we are is a community. So C's, the letter C's, play a big part in our co-working, in our connecting, in our collaborating, and in our community. And that's at the heart of it, what we're all about. In essence, 20 years ago, we started and we continue today to answer the question, what would happen if we shared? And from there, all sorts of good things have happened, which I can elaborate on a bit later.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And then also, I don't know if everyone was expecting this today, but we have a quick little pitch for our space, which I'll hand it over to Alex to do. But we also operate a shared creative workspace, and I'll let Alex explain a bit about what our model is and what that looks like.
Thanks, Tat. No, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the hub that we operate at 44 Gawkles Artsville, Ontario. So in addition to being an art service organization for the province of Ontario, we also operate our own creative hub in partnership with the city of Kitchener. It's their building, their facility, and it's the city's designated creative hub. So we came on as the operating partner 7 years ago. And now, after that period of time, we've seen the building go through many phases of filling space, and now we're at capacity, and 44 Gawkles is home to 32 tenants and 40 plus short-term renters. So it's been amazing to see this building come through before and after COVID. And I'm sure there'll be lots of similarities and maybe some alignment with some of the discussion we're going to dive into in a few moments. But this is our space in the heart of downtown Kitchener that we also manage. Thanks. Okay, so now that we know everybody's facilities, their hubs, their models, we're going to get into some of the more nuts and bolts of the conversation of how these spaces are currently running. So our first question for our panelists is, what strategies has your organization implemented that you believe have kept your community engaged and thriving? And we'll start with Naveen to answer this one.
Thanks, Alex. So I like to often talk about the kind of core of our space, but also imagine that you're at a house party and where folks tend to gravitate to the most, which is the kitchen, always the kitchen. So one of the things that is very special about Sketch is that we offer warm meals, healthy warm meals with all of our programming. And one of the very first questions that you'll get asked as a community member who walks into our space, whether or not you're an artist participant, a visitor, a donor, a funder, a potential renter, anything like that, is, are you hungry? Have you eaten yet? And you get invited into our space to come and enjoy a warm meal. It is served family style, and the kitchen and the serving area are literally at the core of our space. So I think from a design perspective, having the kitchen at the center or the stomach of Sketch was really deliberate, and I think says a lot about sort of where Sketch is at in terms of where we think it's important to engage with community and to keep them thriving first and foremost before we can get to the art making. So a lot of the sort of interdisciplinary community building happens very informally, actually, over sharing a warm meal. There isn't necessarily like a space where folks can go to sit down, which really invites people to go anywhere and enjoy their meal. So we find a lot of cross-discipline interactions happening. So anything from a musician meeting a visual artist to see if they can support with, the cover art of their next EP, or cross-learning happens a lot. A lot of our artists also connect at many of the events that we hold. So annually we hold a block party. We also run an arts market at the end of every year. And we have a core sort of panel style event in the middle of the year. And I think really working to create those events to keep community engaged with one another is something that we're really deliberate about. We also have a couple of tools, one of which is very analog, and then the other is very digital. So if you walk into our music studios, there's actually a bulletin board with some loose pieces of paper that essentially say, I am and I'm looking for. And often what will happen is, I'm a rapper and I'm looking for a beat maker, or I'm a guitarist and I'm looking for a visual artist, or I'm looking for somebody to create merch for me, those kinds of things. So I love that that's still like a bulletin board style, and it's super analog, and it's like a misconnections, but whatever the opposite of misconnections is, like a please help us connect. So that is one way in which we're kind of keeping community engaged with each other. And then another way is that we actually have developed our own online portfolio tool called Folio, where artists are encouraged to sort of upload their own portfolios. And we also connect artists to paid opportunities through that tool as well. So if anybody's looking for artists for any reason, connect with me. We would post that to Folio. And then artists are able to directly bid on those opportunities. And both of those came from really seeing the need to go beyond sort of very specific program delivery and to look towards ways to actually build creative community, which is a really, really important aspect of what was already informally happening at Sketch, but finding very small tools to formalize that has been quite successful. So
Thanks, Naveen. Brienne.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds great, Naveen. It's like really exciting to be a panelist, just to even hear from the other panelists talking as well. But yeah, for the TET Center, I do realize my intro was a little bit short, so I'll try to sort of bolster some of that throughout the rest of my answers as well. But basically, part of our operations is that we are one of 9 organizations in the building, and then those organizations have their own programming within their spaces. And then there's also rental spaces that folks, whether in the building or outside of the building, can rent. And there's like various discounts and stuff for not-for-profit groups or art-focused rentals. So basically, that being said, for creating community engagement events and workshops, a big part of that is our building-wide events. So we really try to activate the building, and that means like for all of the tenants, all of the artists, the cafe on site as well, and activating our rental spaces just to be a platform for people to engage and create. So that kind of looks like family day programming, culture days, spring open house. During COVID, we started doing a summer pop-up market. So having an opportunity outside for tenant artists, and also like we have a teaching artist roster where people can either offer an activity, sell their work, kind of have a promotional thing going on, or we've had like theater groups kind of do a little activity outside as well. So we are right beside the Isabel Bader Center for the Performing Arts. So we have an outdoor space as well that we try to activate for those opportunities. So that's been a really great way to sort of like leverage what we're doing on site. But one of our core programs as well is our TET Tuesday. So it's like a creative accountability group that promotes connection and creation. So basically the concept is anyone can come by, bring their own art project or creative project, or even just come by to chat and connect with other artists or creatives in the community. And that was a really great way to stay connected, especially through the pandemic, but it's really developed over the years. And at the end of each sort of spring cycle, we host a TET Tuesday exhibition. So, giving up community members an opportunity to show their work and engage has been really, really great. And that kind of trickles down into all the organizations, is totally inclusive of almost all mediums, just depending on the space. But pretty much that's been a really great way to stay connected with the community. And, the TED Center for Creativity and Learning is really one of those organizations that people come to if they're new to Kingston. They'll kind of happen upon the building or come to the building and ask, how they can get engaged. So we really help people just kind of connect with the organizations on site, try to develop some collaborative programming too, just to help develop that connection opportunity. So yeah.
Amazing, Gonzalo.
Yeah, this is great. So we've got a few different tactics and strategies that we use to keep people engaged. The premise of this is that different people want to be engaged in different ways at different times, and so we purposely build a diversity of pathways to connecting people. Like Naveen said, the first way is through food. So we believe like all revolutions start in the kitchen. And so we have what we call weekly rituals at both of our locations. So Tuesday is a potluck salad club. Wednesdays is a coffee chat, get the scoop activity, and Thursdays is bagel bonding. There's some customization that takes place because we deliver these with what we call CAPS, community animation people who are work exchange. They're not paid staff, but they're not completely voluntary either. In exchange for 1 day a week working at our site, they get training and formation opportunities and a free membership, a free hot desk membership. And in return, they provide many of these weekly rituals. So that's a low organization, easy path into connecting through food. We also have seasonal parties. We're pretty well known for our parties. We have an epic annual holiday party in December, to which you're all more than welcome. We have summer barbecues, and we have a fall wine and cheese, and those all really hit the mark. People really respond to those. The attendance at those weekly rituals could be 5 to 30 people, whereas those larger seasonal events do tend to bring people out of the woodwork, and we're looking at a couple of hundred maybe. The third way that we work with people is thematically, and so we'll have what we call innovator drinks, which is 2 or 3 times a year. Along with our 6 degrees of networking, we'll have these medium-sized events, meaning anywhere from 30 to 60 people, maybe a bit more, 40 to 80 people who are invited to come out. Anybody can attend. They're open to our members and to the public. And they're no or low cost, but they're thematic. So we'll have one entire gathering around clean energy, and we'll highlight either an internal, like usually an internal, like one of our members, and an external organization doing work in that sector. We've done things around arts alliances, in particular around film. We have something called CSI Cinema. And we've also done something about the networks themselves, like how can networks be leveraged to improve and increase your organization's impact. Another way we gather people is, and this is again going back to sort of small group gatherings, is we offer these one-off, what we call 101s. So these are learning opportunities, social entrepreneurship 101, theory of change 101, money 101, social innovation 101, and we offer those once or twice a year to small groups of people who want to sign up. We also have lunch and learns that draw, again, internal and external people together into a particular subject matter. And we also, on the digital side, we just reinvigorated what used to be called the Common Platform, which is a digital platform that anybody across Canada could join for a sometimes free or small fee. We've just reinvigorated that. It's now called CSI Connects, and it focuses more on skill sharing. And so you have people from all different backgrounds, trades and professional and subject matter experts and academics and practitioners who voluntarily, if their members can, post skills that they're willing to share. This used to be called Hookup, which I thought was sort of fun because we always had, like on the poster, a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Hookup thing, like if you're looking for that kind of hookup, like go here, go off to this site. But what we were doing was connecting people to each other in the space at a point in our evolution when we were only space-based. But now that's gone digital to something called CSI Connects, to which you're all welcome to take a look for that online. So those are some of the small, medium, and large ways that we keep people bumping into each other.
I love all of the programs and just community building events that each of you just highlighted. I think everything sounds so thoughtfully curated, and all of these programs are created with intention. And I think that piece about food is not necessarily overlooked often, because I feel like we all, whenever we see like a food and wine or something like that, it just makes an event seem that much more exciting. But I think that food element is something that really ties a lot of this work together, whether we realize it or not. So thank you for all your explanations of what you do and your programs. Sort of on that vein, we just talked about some strategies that you use to foster your community engaged environments. How have you managed to foster a supportive and collaborative environment for the artists and tenants? So what are some other methods and things that you implement to create the environment aspect of your space? And we'll start with Gonzalo for this one.
Thank you. Well, there's many different ways of answering this question. So I'll see. I've gathered a few. I'll start with this story. The lore in our organization goes that we pivoted from leasing space at 215 Spadina to purchasing our own buildings about 6 years into our existence, because our CEO showed up one day and wanted, in the spring, and wanted to plug in a waffle iron and cook waffles for everybody and surprise them coming in for breakfast on this chilly late winter morning. And apparently, like, the superintendent like bore down on her and like pulled the plugs out and said, "That's ridiculous, you can't do that. That's crazy. You've got to, that's just against the fire code, and no food in here." And it was apparently at that point that she looked out and said, "I'm going to buy the building across the street," and did. And the significance of that story, I think, like, continues to play out for us. Here we are into our 20th year, because there's the framework I use is there are tangible and intangible ways that we create space for people. Some of the tangible ways are, and they sound trivial, but when you start to add them up, they're not. It's the attention we pay to keeping our windows clean on the outside of the building. It's making sure that the staff come in and open up the blinds. It's making sure furniture is arranged in a certain way. It involves having different types of furniture in different states of repair, so that people walk in and they feel comfortable, and not like everything is tight and rigid and uniform and they have to not scratch anything. It's very intentionally what we sometimes call industrial or shabby chic. These are 100-year-old brick and beam buildings, which on their own are beautiful, but they're tough to maintain. Like, I don't want to. I suspect I'm not alone in this reality. And so we use decor as a way to really guide people through the space through passive design techniques that allow them to find the space they need, on the one hand, if they need to put their heads down and work, and on the other hand, bump into people along the way and get to their meeting rooms or their event space fluidly and easily. So one of the first things people notice when they walk in is the vibe of the place. We have one person dedicated to taking care of our plants, also a work exchange. She gets a dedicated desk in return for the labor she puts into keeping the place alive with 120 plants. We have won awards and received so many accolades for how green our space is, because the message that gives to people is that it's a living, evolving space. So those are some simple, almost simplistic, but really effective, tangible ways that we create safe space. Obviously, we also have practices and policies that aim around conflict resolution, around inclusivity and diversity and equity and accessibility, that we strive, that are always a work in progress for us ourselves, but that we constantly strive to bring to the fore. We're a values-based organization. I've never worked in a place that actually held me to account as a staff person for exhibiting the 9 values that are part of our mission statement. And it's like every year you're asked, okay, so how did you get to yes? How did you demonstrate healthy cultures? How did you demonstrate that it's up to us to do this? So that's another, and that's an intangible piece of the culture here that's really important. Another part, between the simplistic things and the policy things, is the curation of the community. And so there was a time before the pandemic where we had a waiting list. Gone are those days. And so now there's a fairly active influx, thankfully, of people coming to see us. When we need to make a choice about who's going to get an office or who's not going to get an office, or what kind of space they're going to be in, or how much can we meet the needs that they have, we have a preferential option for people that or organizations that otherwise might not be able to find the space or afford the space. So we actively curate our membership and create an ambiance that involves all those sort of intangible and tangible things that I mentioned.
So I just want to add quickly about the space curation that you've done. It really does feel like a living room when you enter CSI, and I know that's intentional and that's how you designed the space, but I think that environmental piece is really an amazing touch that you have put into the space to make it more welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually, if I could elaborate on that, that's its predominant feeling, but it's actually, if one looks at it even more closely, there's actually a front porch. Like, we pay attention to the welcoming, and the first thing that people see when they walk in, and like I'm an introvert, and so for me to learn to like smile every time I see somebody, like talk to me, like it's but all of our staff are sort of geared that way. And then there's the living room aspect, and then the kitchen aspect, and a dining room aspect, and then a work aspect, like the meeting rooms and the event spaces. And there's even a bit of an outdoor aspect, although we're confined by that downtown. But we encourage our organizations when they come in here, not just to think of their own workspace, their dedicated desk or their hot desk or their office, however big or small it is, but to see the entire building as their workplace and to utilize it as such. Sometimes it's a phone booth, sometimes it's a round table, sometimes it's alone, sometimes it's in the middle of the action, sometimes it's with music, sometimes it's not. So it's really looking at it as an entire edifice that we strive for.
It's an amazing design. Brianne, let's hear from you next.
Sure, yeah. So a way that we try to keep our tenants and artists engaged is definitely through monthly community meetings. So, at the TED, it would be like hearing all about this like living room area, like that would be so fantastic to have sort of a third space within the building, because we do have a cafe, which is our one commercial tenant, and they have a beautiful space inside, as well as a beautiful shared waterfront patio, just shared between the cafe and the TED. So it is really a wonderful gathering space, but within the building, there isn't really sort of like a living room area. So that's something we're definitely trying to explore. But the way we currently work to, connect everyone and have a supportive environment is through just facilitating sort of brainstorming sessions or like idea sessions where we can come together and chat about ways that we can collaborate, whether that is for those building wide events like Culture Days or Family Day, or if it's something different, like even we have a collaborative camp program for kids with the Queen's Athletic Recreation Services and the organization. So the kids come over from Queens after doing sports for the morning and then engage in art activities in the afternoon. And the instructors are from each of the organizations. So, different initiatives like that, like we would definitely want to sort of reimagine that program for adults as well. So we can kind of have that creative opportunity. But those meetings also really help the tenants connect to say, hey, this is what we have, like the organizations saying, okay, we have a show and sale coming up in the Malting Tower, which is one of the TED Center's rental spaces. Like this weekend, for example, if anyone is in Kingston, we have the Kingston Potters Guild sale and the Kingston Lapidary Mineral Club sale, and then also an exhibition in our TED gallery. So those are all rental events where they're short term. And this weekend, the two of the spaces are from our tenants, and then the gallery the exhibition in the TED gallery is an external artist coming in, and it's their first time doing a show here. So, just kind of talking to each other, I think, is a main thing. And it would be great to facilitate that through sort of a third space. But right now that's kind of our main goal. And with so many different organizations working alongside each other, everyone's hours are very different. So, some folks are open on the weekends, some aren't. So just navigating that and creating, an opportunity for some overlap with different organizations. And I think like anytime you come to the TET, there's always something going on, but sometimes it is more quiet or sometimes it's absolutely crazy busy. So it's really interesting to navigate that and work together to have, more engagement and more interaction. And I just wanted to mention too, just within this area related to policies and practices. So we just actually underwent a process with the Workplace Inclusion Charter that was originally offered through the City of Kingston and sort of Keys Job Center is the organization that facilitated it. So there are inclusion advisors and inclusion coaches that work with businesses and organizations within the city to basically just look at whatever the organization or business wants to look at. So for us, we looked at some of our policies to develop out just to be more inclusive and address different areas that maybe weren't focused on when the policies were originally created. So as our organization, we went through that process, and it was so helpful and helped us develop, a more robust practices and looking at everything a little more critically. And now we're kind of like helping to share that with the tenants. So we're kind of one of our goals is to not only grow and develop as our organization, but help to provide resources for the tenants and artists as well. And, because we do strive to be a welcoming community, but there are so many different invested groups and different folks coming in and out of the building and different stewards of the space that it's really important to have that sort of level of understanding and communication across the board. So that's something that we're really working on right now. And, I'd say we're starting out at a really good spot because you do come in and it is a very welcoming space. But it's a really fantastic initiative. But yeah, that's a really big thing. And, I think one of the challenges for us is that we are a small staff team. So, our office staff is only 2 full-time people and 2 part-time people. And then we have 1 facility assistant that helps on the weekends and a tech custodian, and everyone works so hard. But I think that's always a challenge, just trying to get everything done and trying to be, do advocacy for all the tenants and our artists as well. So it's always exciting, but definitely can be a challenge sometimes too.
I mean, you do so much for a team of 2 full-time staff. I think that's amazing that you're able to still accomplish all these events that you're able to put on with that team that you have. So I think that's amazing to see that. And it sounds like the community really comes together around the tattoo. They are engaged with the programs. They're, the variety of markets or events or special activities that you put on seem to really just be, there's something for everyone, it sounds like. So that's really great to hear. I'll let Naveen finish up here and then we'll keep going.
Thanks. I really love both of those answers. And I think just hearing about, the word of vibe, I think is something we talk a lot about at Sketch. And there are definitely lots of ways that we can physically create a vibe, but I think some ways that are more theoretical are really important too. And I think very much including a way in which folks are greeted right away to create a welcoming space has been a very obvious way in which we've been able to sort of foster a little bit more of a supportive environment. So people are not walking in and having to sort of navigate the space on their own or really discover how to engage with Sketch, even as a visitor or a participant. And again, always starting with that "have you eaten" question. So really just inviting people into a space where we're meeting people at a very human level has been very important. I think the other thing that we do, which we negotiate on an ongoing basis with our community, and first and foremost, it comes in consultation and negotiation with our participant community, but it extends much more to our broader community too. And I can say Alex and Tat came to visit us last year, and just like everybody else, we walk them through our community guidelines. And that is a really key part of what we do at Sketch. They're posted right at our front doors. So first, again, are you hungry? Second, let's walk you through our community guidelines. And that's a living and breathing document that we renegotiate constantly. And we work in consultation, again, with our participants to renegotiate them, have them sort of moving and breathing so that when there are things that are changing or aren't working, that they're not stagnant. So some of the things in our community guideline, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time kind of walking through them, is the first and foremost is negotiation, harmony, and coexistence. So just a consideration of how folks, their words, their experiences, their perspectives, their actions, their artwork even might impact each other is a really, really important part of how we want to create a community of fostering support also. And first and foremost, always wanting to reduce harm and encouraging healthy relationships. So the second is about being yourself. So sharing your own very unique perspective. Things like, sharing pronouns and respecting pronouns are a part of that, accepting people as they are, and sharing ideas and asking for what you need to be able to create art. The third, which we're still holding, and in 2024, is that we take care of each other, which means at Sketch, and this came in consultation. We did a participant-led accessibility consultation last year where participants said we have very few third spaces where they're still masked, and we feel comfortable going into spaces, especially as disabled folks or immunocompromised folks. So take care of each other includes keeping ourselves safe. We're wearing masks still. We're using filters and all kinds of things. We provide all PPE and COVID tests as well. And just respecting that people have different levels of risk and cautions that they feel comfortable with. The third is consent, which is huge at Sketch, which is leading with really informed and enthusiastic and ongoing consent is a really big part of the way that we want to work with each other. And that goes for anything from, of course, touching, hugging, commenting on people's bodies, but it also goes for how we engage with folks about their artwork as well. Making sure that we're asking for consent before we even comment on someone's artwork, or taking photos or screenshots. Those kinds of things are a really important part of how we think boundary setting should go at Sketch. And again, fostering a collaborative environment where folks feel safe. The next one is respecting resources. So really drawing from the dish with one spoon wampum agreement, which is take only what you need and leave some for everybody else. And again, that goes for things like the space, materials, food. They really are all there to be shared with everybody. We also have something like a comfort care cabinet where folks can take what they need. That's not monitored or is almost like low barrier, no barrier. So you don't have to ask permission. But again, really leading with this, if we have this community guideline around making sure that you're only taking what you need and leaving what you can for others, that's really important. And things like even paints and supplies, making sure that you're just taking what you need and you're not wasting, really, again, fosters this environment of support. The next is addressing discrimination. So again, really addressing any violence or harm at the root that's internalized, and really understanding that everybody is learning and unlearning, but that should never be at the expense of someone else's safety. So we really work hard to address discrimination, especially at the systemic level, which can always be a challenge, but something that we really thrive towards. And I think one of the ways that we do that is the next pillar, which is transformative justice, which is, again, we work to address the root of causes of the conflict, and the power dynamics involved, and working with all parties to determine a way to move forward. So that's not only the so-called victim or the so-called perpetrator, but all parties involved really are part of a transformative justice process, should there be any conflict. And then the last is, I think, very much a huge value of Sketch, which is harm reduction. And that is that we really work towards minimizing any judgment and really recognizing folks' individual autonomy and understanding that people are capable of making their own decisions about themselves. So we do things like provide harm reduction supplies. We have naloxone kits. We have sharps disposal in all of our washrooms. But just, again, really fostering a environment where harm reduction is at the forefront. So having these community guidelines, I think, again, less of the physical ways in which we're creating these spaces, but really do become sort of a framework for how we can interact with each other best. And that's staff, that's participants, that's renters, that's our guests. And really allows for everybody to constantly negotiate and renegotiate the ways that they want to feel supported in the space.
Thanks so much, Naveen. And it's very true. You did walk us through the community guidelines before we even went very far into the space. And it's a wonderful approach just to really make sure you're on board with the concept that's happening in this hub, right, in this facility. And it's easy to do that because what you're doing is very incredible and filling so many gaps on systemic levels as you've addressed. And I think all of you really had quite a range of offerings in terms of how you are looking at the environment from the space model itself. While you're independent or you're through the municipality, you are moving forward on how to connect as a community in the hub itself through policies. Like that really came through in each of your answers. You're always re-examining those pieces and it's recent work. And so it's not like you set and done. You're always revisiting those items to really respond to what is needed for in our current world, right? In our present day. So all incredible stuff. Okay, on to this isn't like less optimistic, but it is a question around Brianne's laughing already. The hidden challenges of running our creative hub. So my question to you all is, what are often overlooked aspects of art spaces and hubs as the organizations running these spaces? And Brianna, we'll start with you for this one.
Sure. Yeah. I think, I'm curious to see if this is also the case for Gonzalo and Naveen, but for us, I think facility management is a huge piece. So the city of Kingston owns our facility, and we have a fantastic service level agreement where facility management construction services actually takes care of almost everything within the building. So if there is, a light bulb that needs to be changed, or if there's a leak or anything like that, it's the city that we are able to contact. So that is a huge piece that is just fantastic in the way that our whole master lease agreement was negotiated 10 years ago. But that being said, my role as director is also dual in the fact that I also act as a facility manager. So we don't have someone on site who is designated to sort of take inventory of all the things, that need to be fixed, or even just taken care of, because the city is really great at, changing filters and things like that. But sometimes, because there are so many sites that the city takes care of, there are some things that come up. And especially being a heritage building, there are so many issues that crop up, and they're taken care of really, really fantastically by the city. But just that piece is, I think, at least for my role, one of the most challenging things. And we'll talk a little bit more about like innovation and strategic leadership and things like that. But I find that is a little bit hard to navigate with all of the facility things that come up as well. And it's always very interesting to navigate. And I've learned a lot in this role. But for anyone who's maybe starting out a community hub, that's something definitely to keep in mind. And then, I think a big thing also is just relationship management and navigating different priorities, because when you have so many different people and organizations, artists, some commercial tenants, everyone has their own values and their own priorities for, what they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to do it. So, we're always really trying to work together to ensure that all of that aligns with everyone, but ultimately there's always going to be challenges that arise with that. And then, I think a big thing for us as well is board turnover. So lately we have had a lot of amazing board members join our board, but we had sort of this situation that a lot of the board cycle term has come up. So we had a lot of turnover recently, and I think that's always interesting to navigate, just from like a governance perspective. And the board's done a really great job, navigating that. But I think just the loss of institutional knowledge sometimes when you have people who have been with the organization or at the city for 10 plus years, and then when those people move on, it's just kind of hard to manage that turnover. And then just one more thing I'll note is just the staff capacity and managing burnout. So I think balance, at least in our whole building, but really in our office, work-life balance is really something that we focus on. And it's really hard to navigate sometimes, because oftentimes people working in the arts or in nonprofit, they're working here because like we care so much. So we will kind of go above and beyond, and it's just really important to maintain that those boundaries and have that separation, even though you want to be involved in the creative community as well, but just being able to do that in a way that you're not always feeling like you're working. So yeah, that's always a very interesting thing to navigate too.
You hit all the operational pillars on the head with that answer. You got everything from the facility maintenance of a heritage site to relationship management in your shared co-working space, which I think is something that we can all appreciate on this call. Is like kind of your spaces are always one of compromise, whether it's sound or the type of artistic practice that is happening in a space beside you. So this is part of the package of a creative hub, is this compromising aspect. More turnover, every nonprofit leader ever. When we have that institutional knowledge, like it is really one of those challenges that is always ongoing. And it's tricky to navigate that one for sure. And burnout, it sounds like you guys are really putting lifestyle at the front, or as a priority for your team, which you need to do as a staff of two. We do it too. We're a small team of 3. And if you're sick, just take the day off, Okay, thank you, Brienne. And now we're gonna Naveen. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I echo everything that Brianne just said, and especially around, I'd say one of the biggest challenges always, and especially in spaces like ours, where folks are so completely passionate and are really there because it's something that they really deeply care about, is boundary setting and burnout at work. Even within our community, broader than just our staff, really learning how to work with boundaries has been a big priority as of late. I'd say, especially because of the position that I'm in at Sketch as the resource mobilizer, I will be honest that one of the biggest challenges in operating a creative hub is always going to be financial. Like Gonzalo mentioned, owning and operating a space is an incredible asset, and we're so happy that we were able to purchase our space. It's also our biggest liability, of course. So I think sort of the real estate-ification of artistic spaces is a huge challenge, and just really being able to balance remaining a very community-driven organization who purchased a space because we were floating between several different kinds of spaces, never really found a space that was for us, never really found a space where we could be like loud and proud and bang the drums super loud. And then finally we're able to purchase a space where we could do that, with also wanting to remain completely community-centric and accessible to artists, and balancing that with the need to be able to generate revenue and have other groups come in. So I think one of the really big challenges there, especially for Sketch, excuse me, is that again, we purchased the space because we needed a space to run our programs. Excuse me. How much of that should we balance with how often do we need to bring other tenants, other partners, and are they also coming from the same value mindset that we are? So yeah, I'd say really that balance of remaining accessible to artists while also really prioritizing financial sustainability is a major challenge. So.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And Gonzalo, I'm going to let you hop right on the
Sure.
back
Well,
of that one.
I'll go micro and macro. So one day in January, you come in and you're boiler has exploded. And so a week later, 2 weeks later, in the middle of winter, after like improvising with members, upset members, understandably, you're also faced with $150,000 like replacement bill that does not exist in your budget. It's like, so it's just that, yeah, the glory of ownership needs to be balanced with the risks associated with it, as Naveen said. Another example, just to reiterate issues, similar issues that we have one of our income streams is about 10 to 15% of our income stream comes from external meeting room and event bookings. And from time to time, you'll have groups that know nothing about CSI come in and they start to use the space and treat people in a way that's incongruent with what we're about. And so that feather ruffling happens from time to time, and it's always a challenge. So those are just some micro examples of what's already been stated. What perhaps I'll draw attention to is the interest rates. We're very much affected as the owners of two buildings in downtown Toronto, where the cost of living is higher perhaps than in many other places. That affects your and being in the nonprofit sector. As I said earlier, we're property rich but cash poor, and so making sure that staff are paid appropriately for their professional experience and knowledge is always a challenge, and that affects staff retention. And then further up the ladder, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars are at play with the fluctuation of interest rates when you hold a mortgage. And so we actually at one point last September put up one of our buildings for sale to see what the market would bring, and we're just now into a second cycle of conversations about that, which thankfully have slowed down because it was pretty painful to think about this possibility. And so we've been through one cycle, and now we're entering a second slower cycle of testing the market. But those are weighty decisions when you're talking about property and people's livelihoods and macroeconomic things and individual needs and staff retention. They all get clumped together really in a really complex ball. So that's certainly, those are some of the things that our leadership team struggle with.
Wow. Well, I feel like we echo a lot of that too. We've had similar experiences in our own space. I think something that jumps out for me as someone who pursued a career in the arts, not thinking that facilities management might be something that creeps into your role, or stuff like dealing with like clogged plumbing or stuff like that you just don't really associate as part of a hub lifestyle. Also challenges like working through things that come up between tenants, realizing your space might not be it can't be everything to everyone. Things like sound conflicts that we've navigated through, or folks who are recording right next to a visual artist, or some of these things come up in shared spaces that you don't necessarily think of off the bat. And I think also thinking of the health of, each of you has sort of flagged the health of not only the community, but your staff, the burnout, that definitely is a factor with running spaces where people have, lots of needs, or like needs that you're trying to meet to make sure everyone feels safe, comfortable, getting what they need out of the space. So I think everyone's doing their best, doing a great job. And I feel like all these hidden, little hidden challenges, it's really great to kind of have that in common with all of you as we've encountered similar things in our space. We just have one more question that we want to touch on quickly before we go to Q&A. And I'll invite the audience, as we work through the last question, to start putting their questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them after this last question. But we really just wanted to talk about what the space of what your creative space looks like in the future. So what plans do you have? And what does that look like for the future of your space? So I guess we'll start with Gonzalo for this one, or Naveen. Maybe we'll start with Naveen for this one, because we started with Brianne last time. So Naveen, maybe? Sorry, I lost track of who's starting.
Yeah, no problem. I think the future for us really looks like, again, really moving towards a deeper hub model and having a lot more folks who are community minded and have the same value sets and want to work with the same communities that we do occupy our space. I think Toronto specifically, I'm sure this is not just Toronto, but is in the middle of an arts space crisis. I think I'm ready to name that. It's a very big crisis. And I think the only way that we're going to move through it, number one, is advocating for more unrestricted funds. I think that precarity of funding is a root cause of why we are all feeling the pressures that we are feeling, which is leading to unhealthy boundaries at work, which is leading to staff burnout. So I think really working towards a deeper advocacy around what the funding model looks like right now, while also really understanding and respecting that earned income is a strong strategy and that we need to continue to invest in our earned income. But I will say that one of the challenges that we've had in speaking with a lot of our colleagues at other organizations is this sense that we all need our other individual spaces and that we'll all find tenants or artists to occupy those spaces. And I think that is not going to be as sustainable as we hope that it might be. So I think for Sketch, it really does look like building up partnerships with other arts organizations or creative organizations that want to occupy our space in a much more long-term way, as opposed to the way that we've traditionally kind of had one-off renters or artists occupying space, and all of that being balanced with, again, keeping our space free and accessible for the artists that we work with. We do not want to work so far down the earned revenue model that it becomes unaffordable for folks. And that balance, again, of the community access and finance is always going to be a challenge. I think one of the other things that we're really working towards too, and this kind of addresses both of those things, is and what we used to call sort of social purpose enterprise, is how do we engage more with the artists in our community to actually become facilitators for other organizations in our space. So as we continue to provide programming for our artists and really build up emerging artists into quite established artists, how do we continue to provide them opportunities in our space while also working with other organizations to populate our space and address some of the financial challenges that we're all experiencing in Toronto right now. So yeah, a little bit of a hope for a future, but just really wanting to highlight that again. Yeah, I think that there's a very serious crisis happening in Toronto, and without sort of being able to balance the conversations we're having with government funders, with also earned income, and not purely just forcing organizations to this real estate-ification of their space, I think is quite important.
Yes, I would support everything you said. In brief, our immediate future has to do with consolidating our properties and making sure we deliver on our value proposition to our space-based members, number one. Number two, growing the digital side of CSI Connects and making sure that the things that we can offer are more widely available and affordable, to Naveen's point. Number three, identifying with a little more precision our and our members' ability to catalyze change. So in our theory of change, if we go from co-working to connecting to collaborating to community, that's great. We demonstrated the strength of that over 20 years. And now really with this recent contraction that was driven, by the pandemic and macroeconomic issues, we want to think more deeply about how do we actually affect change, or how do we support others to affect the change they want to see for more people and planet-friendly world. So that's our future.
And I can jump in now as well. So sort of on the immediate horizon, we are undergoing lease renewals for our master lease, and then also all of our organizations. So it's a very exciting time just to sort of think about the next 10 years, because that's the length of time for the leases. So just basically in line with that, we also are 1 year into our 5-year strategic plan. So within that, we've been able to sort of implement some things within that first year, but the next 4 years is definitely going to be focused on building capacity. So, that big finance side, just growing revenue from our existing channels, such as those short-term rentals, like Naveen said, just earned revenue. But that has to do with like staff capacity. So we need like more staff resources to support staff. And then it's kind of like this great cycle. But then also diversifying revenue. So looking at like whether we can set up sponsorships or build out fundraising or create an endowment fund, that kind of thing is what we're sort of looking at right now. And then just like a longer planning horizon. So not just planning a year or two out, like really thinking farther down the line. And then really enhancing access to our spaces and our programs and engagement. So animating the space to be more welcoming and leveraging partnerships. And also like with our rental spaces, one of our biggest things that we can offer the community is space. So trying to figure out a way where we can animate the space when it's not being used, but also, leveraging rental, like our rental program. So just kind of trying to figure out some creative solutions there. So those spaces are, used at bigger capacity. And then really actively advance inclusion and diversity, accessibility in all of its facets, and Indigenous representation and engagement within our organization. So undergoing consultation processes, embedding values and policies and practices, and just really broadening the range of program offerings, and then prioritizing those community collaborations. So a lot of different things that we want to accomplish, and just sort of trying to be a little more strategic with how we're approaching everything. And with some new board members and some new staff, we're really kind of hitting the ground running with that. So, and I've actually been taking some notes during this chat. So I'm really excited to maybe explore some of the things that, you both do at your sites as well.
That's so interesting. You like mentioned taking notes from other hub leaders as well. Like, because like there is no one book on how to run a hub. Like, it really is contingent on your organization's value. There's tons of alignment on this call as well, and like the site itself and your governance and the model itself. So, I mean, what I'm hearing is like everyone's really preserving inwardly, looking at that sustainability piece, but like but through the drive of outward you need to look at your community and how you're going to continue to like provide these services and these programs for the greater good. So it's really great to hear that there is kind of hope on the horizon, and definitely challenges that need to be traversed in the interim as well. So it's all great stuff, and like we just keep on coming together and learning from one another as we do one foot in front of the other, is what I tell myself every day as well. Okay, so we went over a bit, which there was so much to talk about, and this was a rich conversation. So, I mean, we had to keep going, but we do have time for some questions. We'll get to as many as we can. And so what I'll do is I'll read them out. If you have a burning question, please write it down. We'll do our best to get to all of them. And if not, we'll send it out to our panelists and get back to you as fast as we can. But I'll start with the question for the Governing Council. A few years ago, Ingersoll had a drop in a multi-purpose center for youth. They had a $5 membership, so the rules were broken. If the rules were broken, the membership could be pulled. How does Sketch enforce? Naveen, do you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah. Again, transformative justice is such a key value for Sketch that we have developed a very detailed, robust complaints and conflict policy, where we ultimately want to work with somebody who may have like caused harm or created some conflict in the space with them in order to ensure that they still have access to the space. It is very rare at Sketch, I would say almost never happens, where someone's barred from the space permanently. It may happen in a very sort of like short-term period as they're going through the conflict resolution process, but I think for Sketch, again, this value of holding transformative justice and working alongside those who've created harm is really, really important. So again, developing a really, really robust, very detailed, multi-level complaints and conflict policy has been more important than sort of like a punitive style takeaway of someone's access to the space.
Makes sense. And like the multi-layered aspect certainly sounds like it's an important approach to kind of uncovering and really getting to the core of that one. Thanks, Naveen. From Victoria Steele, she would like to hear about how your governance models work. Who wants to go first?
I
Brienne?
can jump in. Yeah. Great question. So for our organization, the way that it originally started was that our board was made up of a representative from each of the tenant arts organizations. And then we underwent a governance review, I believe in 2018, and changed our bylaws to support a community-led board. So right now we have a board of 9 community members, and then I sit on the board as an ex officio member, as well as the director of arts and culture services at the city of Kingston sits on our board as ex officio as well. And then we have 1 subtenant representative, again, ex officio. So really it's a community-based board. And then we have, quarterly meetings and then working groups and our like overall committees throughout, who meet throughout the year.
Thanks, Brienne. Gonzalo?
There is not very much that's innovative about our board or governance model. We have a traditional, fairly small, not like, but I think 8 to 12 max person board that is hands off and deals with the executive and lets us do our thing. So yeah, nothing remarkably good or bad about it.
Not broken, don't fix it, I suppose. Naveen?
Yeah, I'll just echo exactly what Gonzalo said. So we have a board of directors, 8 to 12 people usually. It is very well represented from the community, which is something that we've really tried to work towards over the last few years. But yeah, a governance model of a board and again, an executive board, and they primarily work with our executive team.
Yeah, I think board composition is always interesting to me too in these endeavors. So if anyone has anything they'd like to add in that regard, I'm curious to hear your thoughts personally. But also, Brienne, there's a little bit of a follow-up question, and I don't know if you answered it directly, but someone asked, why did you switch? And you did answer it. But do you want to share?
I can, yeah, for sure. Just basically within our lease agreements, there are rent increases determined every year. So the board determines those rent increases, and it kind of identified a conflict of the tenant representatives determining their own rent increases. So and also just like everyone had sort of there wasn't enough separation there where they were just like those tenant representatives were I can't find my words here, but they basically just identified a bit of a conflict because there wasn't enough separation.
That makes sense. It's interesting in your story too, particularly like those tenants really like I think were quite instrumental in getting the facility to where it's at today, and then that switch over just needed to happen just due to the evolution and time span of the space. So it did make, I think as I understand it, it made sense to make that switch over. But they were that at that one point in time that model was needed.
For sure. And I will just quickly note also that within our, when we changed the bylaws, we did create a subtenant committee. So there is still board level involvement where there's like a reporting process and connection opportunity between the subtenant reps and the board. So, it was really created collaboratively, and it's a much better model now where it's a little bit separated, but still work together to determine operations.
Amazing. Everyone has a seat at the table where it makes sense. Tamsin has a really great question. Can you speak more about the need for unrestricted funds? I would love to hear more about the most pressing needs unmet through the existing funding model. Where to start? And we have 5 minutes.
I would love to jump in. This is my favorite thing to talk about ever, and to yell about, to be honest, not just talk about. So the need for unrestricted funds is, first and foremost, I do think that there still exists a myth around what overhead at organizations like all of ours is. I follow and admire somebody named Vu Lee out of, I believe, Seattle. Nonprofit AF is their website, and they often use this analogy of it's like asking a firefighter to put out a fire, but without paying for the water, only the hose, or without even the hose. So there is, and somebody else in the questions asked this question about how we be able to identify organizations or funders that support operations, and I agree with Gonzalo. It's extremely rare, extremely rare. And even if it is included in a funding ask, there's often, if not always, a limit of something like 15%. And we know that the things that we need in order to operate spaces are people and the physical space itself. And if you can't pay for those things, programming becomes extremely difficult to fund. And it's like asking for, again, asking for the fire to be put out, but without the firemen and without the water. Our staff deliver programming, so they are programming. And without their time to do that, without funding for their time to do that, we can't really find sustainable ways. So this is, again, leading to a lot of organizations moving towards real estate-ification, moving towards financialization of the work that they do, when we would like to be able to focus on working with the communities that we work with. So it continues to be a challenge. It has been a conversation in our sector for over 20 years, and it doesn't seem like we're pushing the needle very far. So I think, again, being loud with funders, pushing back with funders, and really having very honest and transformative conversations about what we as organizations need in order to survive and serve our communities and work with our communities really does include things like our operating costs. And first and foremost, we are professionals, and we want to be able to do our work in ways that does not keep our funds restricted, and to be able to make decisions as we go about what's best for our organizations and our companies. So moving towards unrestricted models, moving towards funding more core operations, funding the things that we need to be proper businesses, like marketing, like staff, like turning on the lights at the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, I should say. Those are all things that we need to be able to pay for. So.
Unfortunately, we are at time for today. So I'm sorry to the other panelists if you had any further thoughts on that one, but thank you everyone for your time. We have 1 minute to go. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing all of your insights and wisdom and knowledge and experience with creative spaces, community building, hub spaces, all of that good stuff that we talked about today. I will be sending along a copy of the presentation from today to everyone who joined, as well as a recording of the webinar. The presentation also includes some links to some of Arts Build Ontario's other programs that we offer that support creative spaces. But other than that, I just wanted to again thank everyone for their time and contributions, and I hope everyone was able to get something from the conversation today. I know I did. About how all the different space models operate and what the plans are for the future. So thank you, everyone. And Alex, I'm not sure if you wanted to jump in and at the wrap up, but thank you from everyone here, Arts Build Ontario, and we'll chat with you, soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the good work you're doing wherever you are.
Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you so much.